now that we have updated the music player to be able to display all the songs that are on the device using the cursor loader, the next step is to enable the user to select one of these songs and then let the music player play that particular song. Now, in this particular case, now since this is a list view, selection of any one of the items in the list view will result in a call to the on list item click listener, which is part of the playlist.java file that we have. Now, inside the on list item click method that we implement, the incoming parameters include the list view, the actual view, the position, and the ID. Now, in this particular case, since this list view is created using a cursor, the ID being returned will be the ID of the particular row that corresponds to the item being displayed in the list view. Now, this ID is used to identify the song that will be played when the user selects that particular song. So what we're going to do now is to take this ID and then return it to the user from this on list item click. So what we shall do here is to take the ID and then include the ID into the song. So now I am not really previously, when I implemented the playlist, I used to use the position in order to identify the specific song that has been selected. Now we are going to use the last parameter, which is the ID, in order to identify the song. So when I call, when this list item is invoked, then I am going to create, again, similar to the case earlier, I'm going to create an intent which will return the ID value back to the music activity.java file, because that is where we're going to return from this particular activity. So in this case, first I create the intent, and then into the intent I am going to put in, instead of the song index value, I'm going to put in the ID value as the return value in this particular case. So the ID value will be returned to the user and then let the user process the information at this point. So we'll go ahead and save playlist.java. Earlier, we were returning the song index value, which was equivalent to the position, but now we're going to return the ID value, which indicates the particular row of the content provider that has been selected by the user. Okay, so once we do that, we notice that this return value going back to the music activity. Now, when the playlist activity completes and then returns the result to the user, then in the music activity.java, this will come back in the on activity result method here. So we now have to ensure that the on activity result method is receiving the value correctly. Now notice that from the playlist.java, when the ID is returned, the ID is of the form is of the type long. So when you have this value coming back to music activity, when we retrieve that item in music activity, it will no longer be get int, but instead the incoming value comes in as a long. Now, long is a double integer, an integer of 64 bits in length, so we need to keep that in mind. And so I will have to update both both the type of the value coming in and update the remaining parts here. So now when I get the song index coming in as a long, and then I supply this song index value to the start song method from the controller, which is the service. Now the controller is expecting the index to be the parameter to be of the type integer rather than a long variable. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I will have to now go into musiccontroller.java and then update the method. Remember that the method being called from music activity here is start song. Now this start song is getting the parameter in as an int. Now I will have to update this to long here. So this change will trigger a sequence of changes that I need to do in different methods to make this work correctly. So now once I update this to long, then you will notice that the problem that we saw, the cross that we saw for this particular statement in musicactivity.java disappears because the parameter is properly being handled there. So now I have already updated musicactivity.java. Now I'm going to musiccontroller.java, and then notice that this value coming in is being passed to the MusicPlayer class, to the start method of the MusicPlayer class. But unfortunately, the start method of the MusicPlayer class is expecting an integer value to come in, but I am passing a long value here. So which means that I will have to go and fix the MusicPlayer .java file to accept the incoming value in the form of a long variable rather than an integer variable in this particular case. So I am going to go into musicplayer.java, and then I'm going to update this value to long. Okay. So once I update the value to long and then save it, now you notice that my music controller's issue in this particular statement has disappeared. So my music controller is now updated. So what happens is that from playlist, when this ID value is passed, this ID value will be returned to music activity. From music activity, it goes to music controller, and through music controller, it lands at the start method of the music player. Now, the incoming parameter for the start method basically is indicating the ID of the row that has been selected. Now, we should make use of that to access the information from the database in order to retrieve which particular song is being played. Okay, so in this case, what I am going to do is, because the ID value is always going to be greater than or equal to 0, so I will use an ID value less than 0 to indicate that I'm just trying to resume an existing song. So in here, when I come into the start method, I notice that I have to call this getSongInfo method here, and then in the getSongInfo method, I am going to fetch all the information for that particular song that I need to play out. Now, this is no longer needed for us because the song information is now being retrieved from the media store content provider. So it is no longer part of our string array. So I'm going to remove that part. And then in addition, as I mentioned, I'm going to use a song value less than 0 to indicate that I want to resume the currently playing song rather than I want to resume the song that was previously being played rather than trying to get a new song and so on. So I would say if song greater than or equal to 0, that means that I am trying to start a new song. At that point, I want to fetch the information for that particular song. So what this means is that I will have to go in to my getSongInfo method and then fix the getSongInfo method in order to fetch the information for the particular song. Currently, what I was doing in the getSongInfo method was, if you go down into the code down below, you notice that I have declared the getSongInfo method right here, where I was basically fetching the information from the shared preferences value. So I have to update this particular method in order to properly handle that. So this particular method, basically what this method does is the index value is received from playlist indicating the ID of the row from the media store content provider. Okay, so the incoming parameter index basically is the value that indicates which particular row is being selected here. Now, what this means is I am only getting the ID of the particular row that indicates the song that the user wants me to play. Now, I have to use this information in order to retrieve the other information about the song from the content provider. So basically, I will have to query the content provider for that particular row. And then once I extract that particular row from the content provider, then I will have all the information about the song. So now I am no longer going to need this particular statement there, so I will remove that. Instead, when I come in here, I will have two values that I'm going to declare here, which I will use in the code. Okay, music column index, and then I will declare a cursor here. Now, what I need to do here is to conduct a query, to initiate a query to the media store content provider and retrieve the information for that particular row, the row being indicated by this index value coming in here. So let me construct the query. To construct the query, I will first create a projection which I will use to query the content provider. So this projection that I'm going to declare here basically will include all the information that I'm going to retrieve from the MusicPlayer. Now recall that I had already done a projection in the playlist.java, so I'm just going to go and copy some of this information from there in here, because I would need some of those information anyway one more time here, so I'm going to retrieve all those. In addition, I am also going to retrieve some other pieces of information. Data. Okay, this is the file handle for the MP3 file or the music file on the device, which I need to play out. So I will retrieve the file handle here because now I really need an access to the file so that I can get my media player to play that particular file. So I'm going to retrieve those pieces of information. So ID, data, display name, title, artist. And also I am going to retrieve one more piece of information from that particular row, which is the album ID. Now, why am I media store, audio, media, and album ID? Okay. I need the album ID in order to be able to retrieve the album art from the content provider later. I'll show you how to do that. Now, this album art is required in order to display the album art on the screen. We'll see how it works in a short while. Now, to do a query on the content provider, I need the URI. Recall that I had created the base URI earlier. Now, in this particular case, I am going to create the base URI, and then I will append the ID of that particular row for which I am retrieving. So when you conduct a query on the database, on the content provider, sorry, I'm sort of mixing content provider and database here, but basically I'm interchanging the values, but I should be saying content provider every single time. So whenever you're retrieving from a specific row, then what you would do is to construct a URI and append the ID of that particular row to that URI, so that when you do the query, that specific row will be retrieved from the content provider. So the content provider's URI is media store audio media external content URI. Okay, and the next part, okay, external content media store content URI, and the second part is the index value that comes in from the parameter that I'm getting here. So I have the base URI, content URIs with appended ID, and then I have media store, audio, media, and then external content URI. So I will have to import URI. URI first and foremost. Let me fix that statement there. I will import the URI, and then so now I have the URI constructed. The next step that I'm going to do is to create the select string. Now recall that we had done the selection earlier, so I am going to just go ahead and then simply copy this select statement. From my playlist.java file, and then I'm going to recall that whenever you need to conduct a query on the URI, on the um, content provider, you need to provide a select statement also. So I will declare a select statement. Now, when I do this, I want to make sure that the display name is not null. And the second part I want to make sure is media store audio media. And I want the data string to be not null. I want the data string to be not null, because obviously when I am trying to retrieve the file handle, I want the file handle to be not null. Otherwise, the music player will not work properly. So these are the selection criteria that I'm putting in there. Now I'm going to create the query and do the query on my content provider. So I'm going to do next. Now this part, I will come back to fix those things later. So the next step that I will do is I will do the query, and then from the query, recall that whenever you do a query on a content provider, you need to get hold of a content resolver, and from the content resolver, you can do the query. Okay, the query would be first and foremost, you supply the URI for the query. So the URI, we have already created the URI, which is the base URI, which I've already declared there. The next one is the projection value, which is given by music summary projection that I have already declared earlier. This is the projection, and the selection value that I'm going to use is select, which string that I just declared earlier, and let's put the selection, and for me the selection arguments is going to be null, and the sort order. Okay, let me put these onto the next line so that it's a bit more clearer. And the selection argument, the sorting argument would be media store audio media, and then I am going to sort it according to the so this select order is simply, we are making use of SQL's SQLite's way of specifying that. Okay, so now we have all the information that is coming in. Okay, through this music cursor, I will be able to retrieve all the information. Now, my song ID will be the same as the index value that is coming in. That is exactly the same. My M song is going to store this information. Now the remaining part of it has to be changed, because the remaining part of it is no longer coming from the string arrays, but instead I am going to make use of the music cursor, which just returned and then from there I would retrieve all the information that I need for that particular song here. Now, from the music cursor, you notice that I am going to be getting information like the title. Let's see, what are the projection in the projection? I have done title, I have done artist, I have done album ID, I have done display name, and I have done data. So from these, I'm going to retrieve all possible information here. So how do I retrieve this information? So I'm going to first, let me get hold of the title of the song. Okay. So I'm going to get hold of the title of the song, and then I would specify this information into the title of the song. So I would say M song title is equal to music cursor get string music column index. Okay, so now I have gotten hold of the title of that particular music file that I'm playing. Now, in addition, I'm going to get hold of the artist's name and then append this to the song title so that I can display it on the main user interface for my music player. So the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to retrieve, again, let me just save myself some trouble by copying the code from earlier. The second part that I'm going to retrieve is the artist's name. Okay, now once I retrieve the artist's name, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to append the artist's name to the M song title. Okay, so the first statement that I'm doing is get the title of the song. Now, because in my user interface, I only have one particular text view within which I'm displaying the song information. So that's why I'm appending the two. Now, I could easily extend the user interface and then add in two text view fields, one for the title and another for the artist's name, but we'll leave it to later. At the moment, let's just retrieve these two pieces of information and join them together. The third part that I'm going to retrieve is the reference to the file. So the third part that I'm going to retrieve is, again, this one would be data. So the third piece of information that I'm going to retrieve, get the file handle. Okay, so I am going to set that to, now the M song file, I would need to declare that music column index. Okay. Now, obviously, it is complaining that the msong file is not available. So previously, I had declared msong title. So I will go back there and then declare the third parameter that I need. msong file equal to null. So these three pieces of information that I'm going to make use of. And then also, while I am there, I might as well declare one more. Uh, I'm going to make use of this later. I'll tell you exactly what I need that for. And going back down here, I have the msong title equal to null. Now, what more can I retrieve from my query? Data. And the last one I need is the last piece of information that I got is the album ID. Okay. So from a projection, there are 4 pieces of information. Okay, to get the album ID, I'm going to do music column index again one more time, and then album ID, and the album ID will be returned as a long variable. And I'm going to use music column index as the variable. Now that I got hold of all the information from my music cursor, recall that the music cursor contains all this information. So I don't no longer need the music cursor. I will close the music cursor. Okay, now that I have the information that I need, I will be able to go ahead and play the song. Let me retrieve some more pieces of information. Now, I just got hold of the album ID, so I'm going to try to get hold of the album art that is available for my music player, and I'm going to use that album art to display on the user interface for my music player. So to do that, I'm going to query another content provider. So I will create a projection for that. Medius, again, same content provider. I will have to query the albums part of the content provider. And media store audio albums dot album art. Okay, so I'm going to do a query of that. So get content resolver, and then do a query of media store audio albums and external content URI. So I'm going to do the so this one, the projection is projection images, and the selection. For the selection, I am going to do the selection as albums underscore ID plus equal to now. So I am going to select that particular row which contains the album. So the selection args is null, and the sort order also is null. So I don't need either one of them. Okay, I'm going to do media store audio.albums.id, and so okay. Now that should take care of it. Now what this query will return is a reference or the URI reference to the file that contains the album art. Now, when the media store content provider does the scanning of the media, then if the album art exists inside the MP3 file, then that album art will be retrieved and stored separately in the albums part of the media store content provider. So I'm just querying there to get access to that. If such a thing does not exist, then I want to display the default album art, which is nothing but the note blue, so I'm going to check if C is not equal to null. That means that I do have a an album art. Okay, so I would say C move to first. Okay, then I would check get string get C dot get column index or throw, and then in there media store audio albums album art. Okay, so I'm going to try and get hold of the album art value there if the string does exist. If the album art exists, then cover path will be equal to null. It will not be equal to null. So that's the part that I'm going to check. Now that I'm finished with that cursor, I will close that cursor, and then I will check if that particular album art value doesn't exist, then the cover path will be equal to null. So if the cover path is equal to null, then I am going to set cover path as Android resource hkust.comp4521.rdu plus r.drawable.noteblue. So if the album art exists, it's okay. If not, I am simply going to set the value to r.drawable noteblue. And then after that, at the end of this, I will set my album URI to. Okay, so now my information that I need for my song has all been retrieved. Now at this point, let me just simply do a log and then print out some information. Just so that I know that I have I just want to make sure that all these values do exist there. Now, in my shared preferences, I will push all this information in there. So first and foremost, I will push my song ID, then the song title, then song ID, song title, then what's the next piece of information that I'm going to push? File name, and the value would be basically all the information that I just retrieved. I'm going to push them in there. And the value will be album URI. Okay, so I have all the information that I have pushed. All right, and the position values and all that we have already saved earlier. So that's perfectly okay with us at that point. Okay, so we will save these changes here. Now, when I go back into my earlier stage, I need to make some more changes here. Notice that when I am retrieving the shared preferences in the set context, I need to make sure that I am retrieving all the information that I need in this particular case. So let's examine that in more detail. So coming back to the set context method here, we notice that this is where we set up the information for our song, restoring the information from shared preferences. So here I was using this string array, so the string array is no longer needed. So I'm going to get rid of that string array. And in shared preferences, from the shared preferences, I'm going to restore all the information for the different variables that I use within this particular MusicPlayer class here. So first and foremost, the song preferences, if I don't have anything, by default I set it to -1. indicating that there is no song that I am going to be playing the currently already established song. So I don't need to initialize any of the variables here. In addition, I will initialize the song title, and the default value would be null. And similarly, the song file is restored from the file name, and the default value is again null. And album URI will be restored from get string from album art. The default value, if none exists, then the default value will be set to Android resource and r.drawable dot note blue. So if I don't have one, then I will set the default value to that. And if msong file is not equal to null, then I'm going to, so basically this is where I am indicating that if I have a currently running song, which means that msong file is not equal to null, then I'm just simply going to start that currently established song. Otherwise, I'm just not going to do anything at this moment. So this will take care of the starting point where I am going to initialize the player the very first time. Now, in addition, I have to remove this method, statement from there. So with these changes now, the set context and the get song info methods are properly initialized. Now, one other thing that we should do is the fact that earlier we were starting in the start method. I did a little bit of change already before. So I have set up some amounts of information here. And because the get song info method, sorry, let me just cross check again. The get song info method should be getting in a value of long as the index here. Okay. Now, previously we were playing the song that was already included in the raw folder of our application. So that's why for the player we used to do media player create. But now when you're playing a song from the SD card, from the storage, then what we need to do is to create the media player and then initialize it in a different way. So I would create a new media player. Okay, and in addition, this media player create method is no longer valid, so I have to remove that. Okay, because I have already created a new media player earlier. So I would, for the player, I would set audio stream type, and then the stream type would be audio manager, and then stream music. So basically the song is being played on the music stream of my audio player. So that's one thing that I need to set up. In addition, earlier I was doing media player create. Now in this particular case, when you are playing a song the from a file on the device's storage, what we should do is to say player set data source, and then you supply the path name there. The path name is stored in msong file already, so I'm going to just simply make use of the msong file. Now, when you do this this set data source, you have to surround it by the try catch, so that in case there is any problem, then it would be properly caught if the data source is not properly initialized and so on. So that's why we have surrounded by the try catch method here. Now we will now set the looping to false. In addition, if you are using a player that plays music from a file on the device storage, then after you set the data source, you have to prepare the file. So you have to do player.prepare here. Now similarly, this has to be surrounded by try catch method. So once we do that, so you have the step-by-step way of doing this. First, you have to set the player data source, and then you in this particular case, I'm setting the looping to false. In addition, after that, I need to do player prepare in this statement here. The rest of the code remains just as before, so we'll leave it as it is. So now, in addition, the M song that I was using earlier was of type int, so I will change that also to type long. Save the result, and then I still see one error in the file, so let me go and then check where the problem is. Okay, so this should be put, instead of put int, that should be put long. Okay, that should take care of all the problems within the code. So I have managed to fix all the code properly, so it should work correctly this time. So let's go ahead and try the new version of the MusicPlayer application. So launching the new version of the MusicPlayer application, you will notice that when the MusicPlayer application starts, since we have been using the MusicPlayer from before, now this is a clean version of the MusicPlayer application. So now let me go ahead and select one of the songs. And then the song starts playing in the background. The MusicPlayer works exactly like before, and in addition, you notice that the notification is properly set. So all the rest of the code will work exactly like before. So you notice that all the typical functions of the song are being performed just as before. Now, one thing that I have not yet fixed is the fact that we have uh, the space here where we can display the album art. The album art information is being extracted appropriately in the code there. So we'll go ahead and fix this part of the user interface to display the album art correctly. So that'll be the last step that I need to do. First and foremost, in here in the code, I will introduce another method for returning the URI for the album art. So let me go ahead and declare another method, album URI. So this method will return a URI. So in this case, if the album URI is null, then I will simply return Android resource hkust.com4521.audio. So if the resource is null, I'm just going to return the note blue. If the resource is not null, then I'm going to return the album URI string that we have, where we store the path to the URI. So this is the modification that I'm going to introduce here. In addition, let's go to the main.xml file and then fix up the note blue to be able to display the appropriate song information there. So for this note blue, for the song image, what I am going to do is to set up some of the parameters for the song image image view. So what I would set up for the song image is that I would set up the layout width and height. I will fix the layout width and height to, instead of wrap content, I would fix it to be 240 dp and also the height to be 240 dp. So I will have a fixed size for the song image, 240 dp each, and that should take care that whatever image file that I have, album art file that I have, will always occupy exactly the same space on the user interface. Okay, so with this minor change, now we will have to go into the music activity.java file one more time, and then wherever we display the song information, we need to ensure that the album art is appropriately set to the correct value. So in here, you would notice that there are several locations where this information. So what we will do is to introduce a new variable in here called album art. Okay, and then I will get an access to the I will declare the album art image view, and then in addition, in my music activity where I get access to all the items on the screen, I will get a reference to the song image, so that now I can change the value of the album art image resource on the screen whenever I have an album art to display. So in addition, in the code where I set the song title, so recall that in here I am setting the song title. So I am going to do album art set image resource, set image not resource, set image one more time. Image URI, and then player album URI. So that's the reason why I introduced the album URI method there. So this is how I will set up the album art to be that value. One more location where I need to introduce this change is that when the player is set to ready, I should also change the album art at this point. So these two locations. So with this minor change, you will notice a slightly modified version of the music player, which will also display the album art on the screen. Okay, so let's test the new version of the music player. And as you recall, we have already introduced to the music player the way of seeing more time. So we'll notice that when the music player starts running, it'll be initialized to the correct value, and then when you can start playing the music as usual. And for some of the songs in my list, I have the album art included in the MP3 file. So in those circumstances, the album art is displayed on the screen as shown in the picture here. Similarly, I have one more example of a song where the album art is being displayed, and but for songs that don't have the album art being included in the MP3 file, you display the standard blue note there. So with this modification, you see that the music player has now developed into a pretty functional music player that you can use on your device to play the music files that you have included on your own device. Okay, so that completes this week's lab exercises.